Yo, my bad, ladies and gentlemen. We had a technical difficulty. You know what I'm saying? The video, well, not the video. For whatever reason, Streamlabs crashed on me. So yeah, we're gonna try to get back into this film though, man. So I do apologize for the interruption, ladies and gentlemen. But we about to get back on that right now.
Translation of the Bible, and the Anunnaki being simply an ancient Mesopotamian archetype. For the sake of the story, I will be telling the tale from the perspective that the Anunnaki are physical beings. But as always, feel free to interpret this however you like, and please share your thoughts in the comments below as to what you believe these Anunnaki were.
Share and subscribe button, man. Y'all feeling this video?
This story begins several 100,000 years ago and starts in the midst of a drama involving the Anunnaki, the planet Nibiru, and our Earth. Sitchin wrote that he believed that the planet Nibiru was inhabited with life at one point in its history. He wrote that the dominant species on the planet were bipedal in stature and had evolved conscious minds. They were the Anunnaki. These beings were said to be much bigger than we are today, with the women being about 10 to 12 feet and the men being 14 to 16 feet tall, which you might recall relates with the various levels of consciousness we explored way back in Spirit Science 11 and 12. The Anunnaki were not immortal, but they had exceptionally long lifetimes compared to what we're used to. Sitchin's translations estimated their lifespan to be somewhere between 360,000 and 500,000 Earth years. However, another scholar, Lawrence Gardner, suggested the Anunnaki only had lifespans of 50,000 years. The Anunnaki have been described in several different ways. Most commonly, they're depicted as tall, bearded men, and sometimes there are women and children depicted as well. However, they sometimes are interpreted to have been crocodile-like in nature or with reptilian features. If you're familiar with a lot of New Age ideas, you might have heard of the idea of reptilians, which are said to be bipedal lizard creatures and are usually the antagonists in the human story. However, just as there are reptile humanoid statues from ancient Sumer, so too are the Anunnaki also depicted as bird-like, which Sitchin believed was simply their space helmets. Either way, both of these depictions of the Anunnaki, as reptiles or birds, are scarce, with the tall bearded men version being the most prominent. I do believe that regardless of what these beings look like, it's the bearded image of these so-called deities that gave us our common Christian image today, God as an older gentleman with a long beard. To that end, even Sitchin fought the idea that the Anunnaki were reptilian beings, and this was because he wanted his theory to fit with the Bible. To him, the gods could not be in the form of the biblical serpent. Nevertheless, these different depictions have given rise to a lot of online debate about what these beings could look like, if they're even literal physical beings to begin with. Many proponents of the reptilian theory suggest that these beings are actually shapeshifters as well, and can change their form at will, which is why there are different depictions of them throughout history. This adds an entirely new dimension to the discussion and gives rise to the popular conspiracy theory that they could even be living among us today in secret. At any rate, for the focus of this series, we're going to keep to the depiction of the Anunnaki as these bearded humanoids, and we'll come back around to the alternate depictions sometime later on. One of the most important Sumerian gods is the Sky Father named Anu. A number of Sumerian texts discuss Anu, but not all agree to every aspect of his existence, such as where he came from or what he actually is. Despite the fact that we previously observed Anu as Uranus, on an allegorical level, Anu could simply be the way that the Sumerians personified the sky, and therefore the Anunnaki are those who came from the sky and outer space. The name Anu is the root word of Anunnaki, which is sometimes translated as offspring of Anu or princely offspring. This is why Sitchin believed that they were the species that came from above and beyond our planet. Anu was the heavenly father, and those who descended from the sky were his children. Once again, we see descriptions of God today as passed down throughout history. In Christianity, God is called the Heavenly Father, the origins of which we find with Anu, the ancient Sumerian god of the sky. According to Sitchin's translations and theories on the subject, the Anunnaki were technologically advanced beings living on the planet Nibiru. Let me also be clear that in Sitchin's book, The Lost Book of Enki, he puts forth a potential version of this ancient past drama, which is really epic, but also very elaborate and long. Honestly, this book would make a great Hollywood movie, just saying. Actually, in a way, it kind of already has. And I just want to take a moment to give a huge shout out to the band and team behind Messengers of the Wind,
Hey,
an
make sure y'all
animated
go
rock
like this
opera
video,
that you can
share,
watch right now
subscribe,
on
know what I'm
YouTube.
saying? Share it
The
to
whole thing
YouTube.
is seriously
Know what I'm
amazing,
saying? Let's
and I
get
just
this
had
out
to give
there,
it some
bro.
mad props right here and now. As for today's exploration of this theory, we're just going to be going over the essentials. Otherwise, we could literally be here for a week. Sometime around 450,000 years ago, long after the event between Nibiru and the planet Tiamat, the Anunnaki began having a problem with their planet. As we discussed earlier, this planet had a very strange orbit, which took it far away from the sun for long periods of time. Sitchin interpreted from the tablets that the planet had a lot of internal heat, which kept things alive in the long distances of space. However, over time and with the cooling of the planet, and potentially even the widening out of its rather sharp orbit, Nibiru grew colder and colder during its long voyages away from the sun, and the planet was slowly becoming less habitable. Sitchin suggested that the Anunnaki scientists decided on a solution that would strengthen their atmosphere and hold heat in for significantly longer periods of time, making it possible to survive in the far reaches of space. The Anunnaki decided that they would gather large amounts of gold and pulverize it into a fine powder and release it into their atmosphere, essentially creating a heat container for their planet. Believe it or not, our scientists have considered the exact same thing, putting light reflecting particles into our stratosphere to help fix the ozone layer and cool our ever-warming planet. And so, in their attempt to solve their problem, they began looking for large quantities of gold in our solar system, as their planet didn't have the large quantities they needed to coat an entire atmosphere with gold. The Anunnaki had the capacity of space travel, though Sitchin believed that at the time, they weren't much further advanced than we are right now, since they didn't seem to have the ability to travel to other solar systems in their search. They scanned all of the planets in our solar system until they found what they were looking for, large deposits of gold right here on Earth. As the story goes, when Nibiru first came into our solar system, the Anunnaki would deploy a team of workers to Earth's orbit with one singular purpose: to mine gold. In the process of doing this, they also established a way station on Mars, which would help in shuttling the gold back to Nibiru once it was mined. Sitchin also believed that they had, during this time, built the face on Mars as a monument to an Anunnaki who had died there, after playing a pivotal role in finding the gold, which was going to save their planet. To lightly touch on the subject of the face on Mars, when you investigate this yourself, you'll find two prominent stories. One is the official response from NASA, which says that it's just a natural rock formation which, due to the way the light was hitting it at the time of the photograph, created this image of a face, but ultimately, it's just an illusion. Generally, those who question this perspective are often subject to ridicule. And so of course we have to go there. It wouldn't be spirit science if we didn't. On the other side of the spectrum, you'll find ex-NASA scientists and astronauts, retired US Army command sergeants, and a university physics professor, along with a number of ancient astronaut and conspiracy theorists who put forth that the face, along with a set of nearby mountainous structures that look an awful lot like pyramids, are the remnants of an ancient civilization. Now, please know that I fully understand this is a huge claim, and one that we don't take lightly, so please allow me a moment to share with you what we've come up with while investigating this whole thing. In a lecture given in 2009, Bob Dean, a retired command sergeant major, said the following.
Ladies and gentlemen, my government, NASA, NASA, which many of us in the United States say stands for never a straight answer, proceeded to erase 40 rolls of film of the Apollo program. The flight to the moon, the flight around the moon, the landings on the moon, the walking guys here and there. They erased, for Christ's sake, 40 rolls of film of those events. Now we're talking about several thousand individual frames that were taken that the so-called authorities who did not have a right to see. Oh, they were disruptive, socially unacceptable, politically unacceptable. I become furious. I'm a retired command sergeant major. I was never famous for having a lot of patience.
Now, another man named Brian O'Leary, who was a NASA astronaut and a close friend of Carl Sagan for many years, expressed in an interview with Project Camelot that a huge rift was created in their friendship over the face on Mars.
Carl and I debated this, and it was very disappointing to me because not only was Carl wrong, he also fudged data. He published a picture of the face in Parade magazine, a popular article saying that the face is just a natural formation. But he doctored the picture to make it not look like a face. And I began to realize just directly, from a scientific point of view, not only hearsay, that this man was colluding with NASA, that there might be more to this than before. And then when I started studying things like MJ-12 and other organizations that were covering up the UFO phenomenon, Carl was on a committee with a number of notable people. There was a report issued by the Brookings Institution in 1961, and that's about when I knew Carl. During those years, the 60s mostly, is when I worked closely with him, that he and this other group said, well, if any ETs ever showed up on the Earth, it has to be covered up. That's the only way we're going to be able to manage this, because if we can't, it would be too much of a culture shock. So their recommendation to the government in 1961 was to cover up the UFO phenomenon. And I think in a way that provided a justification for the ongoing cover-up. Way back in '61 was to keep things secret.
But Bob and Brian aren't alone in their claims. We also find very accomplished scientists and mechanical engineers who are involved with NASA who basically share the same story. We'll share some links in the author comments so that you can read up on all of these responses to Cydonia and the face on Mars. And with that, it's about time we return to our story. Now in the Enuma Elish, it says that Marduk placed 300 Anunnaki in the heavens and 600 on the earth, or the netherworld, depending on the translation. And all of these Anunnaki were led by 12 leaders. Sitchin believed that this was attempting to describe that there were 600 worker Anunnaki who came to earth to dig the gold, who were led by 12 supervisors or bosses. The 300 gods in the heavens were believed to be another 300 Anunnaki who stayed in orbit on their mothership above the surface of the planet, similar to how we have the International Space Station in orbit today. To begin their mission, the Anunnaki first went to the Middle East. Sitchin believed it to be in the area of present-day Iraq, where in 7 days they established Eridu. Eridu is commonly believed to be the oldest Sumerian site across all of Mesopotamia. And is it possible that this is where the 7 days of creation come from in Genesis? Either way, it was here that they established their headquarters. For the gold, however, they went to mine a specific valley in Southeast Africa, where the largest natural deposit of gold was known to be. Of the 12 supervisors, Enlil was the leader of the whole operation, and Enki was second in command. The Anunnaki carved deep into the earth and dug large quantities of gold. Then, every 3,600 years when planet Nibiru came around, they would shuttle the gold to their homeworld and return to digging while Nibiru traveled its orbit again. Now, according to Sitchin and supporting theorists, they dug for a very long time, about 100,000 to 150,000 years before the rebellion took place. Somewhere between 300,000 and 200,000 years ago, the Anunnaki workers rebelled against their bosses. They did not want to keep digging in the mines. One can easily imagine them saying, "We've been digging gold for 150,000 years and we're tired of it. We're done." The rebellion presented a problem for the supervisors, and something had to be done. This is where Enlil and Enki come into the story in a very prominent way. If you recall, in the original Sumerian story, we had 2 versions of the conception of humans. In one, it was Namu's idea, and in the other, Enlil told Namu the idea, who gave it to Enki. So as our story goes, during the time of the rebellion, Enki's mother communicated with Enki while he slept, sending him a vision saying, "Oh, my son, arise from thy bed, from thy slumber. Work what is wise, fashion servants for the gods." Due to the variations, it's not clear about where the true origins of this vision come from, but nevertheless, Enki awakens from this vision-filled slumber and suggests creation of servants for the gods. According to the story, Enki himself creates human beings out of a mixture of clay and the blood of the slain Kingu. This is another time where we have 2 different interpretations converging on each other, because earlier we saw how Kingu was interpreted to be the moon, but now Kingu seems to be a being with flesh and blood, for it is with Kingu's DNA that provides the necessary ingredients for human genetics. What is Kingu, really? Looking at the rest of this description, we see a few more possible interpretations. To some, the term clay doesn't mean like physical clay, but earthly matter, including pre-existing life. And many believe that this line actually means that humans were created in a synthesis of Anunnaki DNA and the DNA of the highest form of primitive life available on the earth. This then would suggest that humans weren't necessarily created, but came from a modification of an earlier hominid species, which was most likely either Homo erectus or Homo heidelbergensis. For years, we've been struggling to find the missing link between our species, Homo sapiens, and our predecessors, and this search is still taking place today. Perhaps this is our missing link. What's especially interesting about this is the timeline, because we currently understand that Homo sapiens emerged roughly 200,000 to 300,000 years ago, which is said to be right about when the Anunnaki rebellion took place. Throughout the tablets, genetics and the transformation of the human being are recurring themes. In the Flower of Life books, which originally put a lot of different pieces together in these stories, Drunvalo puts forth another piece of information that is very intriguing. He describes that in order to create a new species, you need both a father species and a mother species. Just like in order to create a child, you need a mother and a father. Drunvalo said that the Anunnaki were our mother species because they did the actual birthing, and that our father species were actually the Sirians, or at least a species from the star system Sirius. So to be very clear, these beings came from Sirius, not Syria, which is one of the closest stars to us and the brightest star in the sky. Well, not counting the sun. Okay, second brightest. Now, while the Anunnaki were primarily a third-dimensional species, the Sirians were fourth-dimensional, and so were able to come to our planet in a way that was probably like tessering from A Wrinkle in Time. In a stunning ritual, he described that these beings traveled here interdimensionally and entered directly into the womb of the halls of Amenti and before the Flower of Life, the sacred heart of all consciousness on the planet. Because they understood everything was light and energy, in their fourth dimension, they created 32 rose quartz slabs and then laid down upon them and entered into a long meditation, conceiving a new consciousness. Then Enki on the third dimension created a laboratory human egg, a genetic fusion of Anunnaki DNA and the DNA of the previous hominid species, and put them into Anunnaki women who were volunteering to do this. The new seeds of consciousness created by the Sirians then entered into the eggs and impregnated the women who nurtured.
So look, this right here is a little long, so I want to try to get into something that's actually shorter. So there's one that I actually think is really interesting that we should check out.